So, it's been a big week here in the UK, particularly on the topic of digital government. So, what happened is on Tuesday, January 21st, the Secretary of State for Science, Innovation and Technology, the Right Honourable Peter Kyle, finally announced the sort of vision for digital government transformation in the UK. This is something that had been in the works for months. They'd been doing a lot of research and thinking, lots of different things have fed into it. And finally, they made the big announcement. It came with a speech, a really snazzy video that I'll link to, as well as two reports, both one sort of looking sort of the state of play and two, a vision looking forward. This is important stuff, so I'm going to quickly create 4 videos. One, this first video here is going to look at the state of play right now, really mainly the first report. Second video will look at the 6-point plan that Peter Kyle laid out. The third will be the new GDS, the body that's been created to make this all happen. And the fourth video will be sort of more of an overview of everything as well as an analysis. So let's dig into it. First things first. Well, the first thing they did was they really laid out what is the current state of digital government in the UK. And they've created this fancy report. And I'm just going to give sort of a high-level summary of some of the key things I think are important from this report. So let me just share my screen. So in this report, they talk a bit about how much government is investing in digital. It's a lot of money and a lot of people and a lot of time that are happening. So there's over £26 billion that are annually being invested into digital technology. That is being used to employ a workforce of 100,000 digital and data professionals that are then delivering millions of online transactions that impact millions of people across the UK. So this is a big part of government. It's a lot of money. That said, this report highlights 18 problems or issues it sees with how the government's doing this. I'm going to quickly skim through a bunch of them here. First things first, users expect more. The expectation and the output are not aligned. And I think part of this has to do with what we've become used to in the private sector, and we expect government to at least be up to that standard. And currently it is not. As you can see, people's satisfaction is dropping with government services. The second one is that a lot of services aren't even digitized, which is amazing. It's 2025, and in 2025, huge amounts, almost 50% of services are still lacking a digital pathway, and often include having to do things manually as part of that. That's not good enough for where we live now. There's issues of productivity. Productivity is something you're going to hear a lot about, not just here in the UK, but I mean, it's a big topic in the United States right now. It's a big topic in a lot of places. This feeling that government's productivity is not what it needs to be, and sort of looking at technologies, particularly AI, as a solution to improving productivity. Anyone who works in government knows how fractured and fragmented the government is. You know, every single department has its own tech stack, its own way of doing things, and this leads to a huge problem, particularly with stuff like data. Data is so important to the driving of a digital government, and it is fragmented, it is underused, it is not working the way we need to. So we need to find a way to do data better and really harmonize and weave together the structures of government. Part of this problem also is there's just so much legacy. Recoding America is, I think, one of the best books written in this field in a long time, and the author Jennifer Polka oftentimes talks about the issue of legacy tech, legacy policy, holding back government, and this is definitely the case here in the UK, which leads to unreliable service, which has real implications for people. I was really interested to see cybersecurity mentioned in this report. This is something you're going to hear a lot more of. We now live in a digital world. Cybersecurity is a day-to-day reality. Risks are high and increasing every single year, and government really needs to up their game, both for their own protection, but also the protection of citizens and people within the country. There's a whole bunch of stuff that's in this report and in the other report around funding, which I thought was interesting. As I mentioned earlier on, and at the top of the report, there are billions of dollars that are spent on digital technology by the government. The way the government's spending it is one piecemeal. Each department is spending its own money independent of each other, and there could be a lot more sort of bringing together and having a more cohesive and coordinated and aligned spending plan to save money, because it's just really inefficient the way that they're spending it. But there could be a lot more intentionality with how money is being spent as well, to allow for really market-shaping forces to support entrepreneurs, for example. It's really hard if you're a small business or an entrepreneur to work with government, and that is a theme that comes through in both reports, which is great to see. And I thought this point here was actually particularly a smart one. So in the last 15 to 20 years, technology has shifted from a capital-intensive business based on the acquisition and creation of hardware and software assets to a revenue-intensive business based on continuous improvements in subscription services. And I mean, this is something that we all see as we've moved from just buying something to now you get a monthly subscription to everything. That's a completely different business model, and it changes how governments spend their money, and they haven't changed their funding models to keep up with this. Another thing that was a big thing that jumped out at me is this idea that public sector is dependent on external resources for skills. And this is something that is particularly a passion of mine. Government ends up bringing in consultants for everything. Instead of developing internal skills and expertise, they turn to consultants that are, sometimes 3 times more expensive than a public servant in-house advising on this. And if this is something that the government is needing on a regular basis, we should be really developing this skill set in-house. So this is something that I think is quite important. And not just bringing in developing this talent, but really putting in positions of leadership. So the sort of pull everything back to sort of 5 core root causes. And I want to jump to the other report because I think it does a good job of talking about these 5 root causes. So one is leadership, that, we need to put people into positions of power and then incentivize them to have digital be a bigger priority. 2 is structure. We've already talked about how fragmented government is, but not just how fragmented it is, but the incentive structures that we put in place also do not help front and center digital transformation in the way government does things. Measurement. We don't have good, effective ways of measuring what success looks like and knowing whether we're achieving that success. So we need to update our measurement and the way we do things. Talent. Again, we've talked a lot about talent already, but there needs to be much more intentionality around how we develop, procure, develop, build talent around digital within the government and within society more broadly. And then, of course, funding. Government spends a ton of money. It is not doing it smart. It needs to build better strategies about how it uses its funding. So this just sort of gives you an idea of what the current state is. There's been pockets of success, obviously, within the government, but systemically, the success has been this in spite of the system, not because of the system. And so now, basically what this lines up is their vision of shifting the system as a whole to make these positives the new standard and not the outliers. So quite excited about that. Let's check out video number 2 to learn more about their 6-point plan.